everyone, it is Rory and Rosie here from that Eurovision site, and my God, has there been some drama and development over the past sort of 24, 48 hours now. From seven, we are down to two potential host cities for Eurovision 2023. Glasgow or Liverpool will be the city that will welcome the world, Europe, Australia, everyone next year in May. Which one, though? Could not bear to tell you, basically.
I would say you decide, but we don't decide at this point anymore. We have literally no control over this process.
I honestly also feel like
Maybe you decide.
I think so. And to be honest, if I had any sort of control about like who would have gotten this, I would have just like scrapped it all and just gone with Manchester. But that's my own personal opinion, so that's fine. So Rosie was the sort of person responsible for our Glasgow sort of tour video, and I went to go to Liverpool for the tour video there as well. Have a check out on our YouTube channel so you can see both of those videos, so you can kind of get more of a feel for each of the cities. And I guess we should kind of just go into this. I mean, what's your sort of reaction, I guess, to having Glasgow and Liverpool aside of everyone else?
I mean, my first thought was just, my God, Liverpool came out of nowhere. Glasgow, I think we were all expecting. I think that's sort of been one of the names that's been bandied about even since before we knew the UK was going to host. It's been a name that's been bandied about ever since we were like, Sam Ryder might do quite well. So that really isn't a surprise. And it's been kind of synonymous with Eurovision and hosting Eurovision, particularly since the release of the Story of Fire saga as well. So that for me was not a surprise at all. And I'm pretty happy seeing it up there. But yeah, Liverpool was not an expected choice at all. And we're going to talk a little bit about this more. I'm throwing my cards on the table. I know very little about Liverpool. I've never been there. I've had a watch of Rory's incredible video that he did doing our lovely tour around the city. And that's about as much experience of Liverpool as I've ever had. So maybe there is something there that I don't necessarily know about, but I'm interested. I was really interested, particularly seeing the videos that have been put up, the sort of little marketing videos that have been put up for both cities on the main Eurovision website. Liverpool really want this. And that for me is really exciting. A city that really wants to host Eurovision, and you can really see that very clearly. So while I don't necessarily know a lot about what the city has to offer as a venue, I do know they want it, and that is exciting.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I when it came out, when the BBC statement came out yesterday, we're recording this the day after that the announcement was made. When it came out yesterday at around 2:30 p.m. British time, and I saw that it was Glasgow and Liverpool, I was like jaw was on the floor. I was like, I mean, we all kind of expected that Glasgow would make it, obviously, after the whole Fire Saga story, and given the fact that it was sort of one of the most commentated on cities that could potentially host this, like the contest next year. But I would have at least said it would have been Manchester against it, given the fact that it has the largest Ukrainian community outside of London, or the largest still in the sort of host race. Not to mention it had the largest arena out of all of the potential venues. And then it was Liverpool. I was shocked. And I still am a little bit. I don't think it's fully sunk in, but I mean, fair play to both Glasgow and Liverpool, obviously. I mean, it's great that we've managed to sort of whittle it down this far anyway. I'm really unsure who's really going to take it now, because obviously Glasgow was very much seen as like the favorite the whole way through, but at least within the UK, we are a very big fan of an underdog here. And my God, my God, I mean, literally the odds for Liverpool shot up in the hours before it sort of came to the sort of decision. So I
Yeah. It's
entirely
interesting
rule.
seeing that.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule Liverpool out, to be honest. I don't think so. So I guess, you know, you've been in Glasgow, you know, you've had a look around the city, you've had a look around the arena and the sort of the area that it could be. Do you think that it could be that like, you know, it's got what it needs to be a Eurovision host city?
Absolutely. I mean, I was really impressed when I went to Glasgow, and I went knowing that I was going to make this video, and I went knowing that it was in the running to be a host city. So I was kind of looking out for those sorts of things that would make a host city really interesting and really exciting. And Glasgow really did fit the bill for me, actually. I think there's a lot of culture there. I think there is so much going on in terms of museums, in terms of galleries. There's beautiful green spaces throughout the city. It's incredibly historic. It's the city centre itself is Glasgow's got a bit of a shit rep in the UK. And I was so surprised at quite how pretty some of it was. I really didn't expect it to have so much history throughout the city centre. And I really, really enjoyed just being in that space for a few days. I went to a couple of the art galleries while I was up there. I went to the Museum of Modern Art. I went past the Kelvin Grove Gallery, but I didn't go in. And I went to the Centre for Contemporary Arts as well, and that was a really cool little space as well. And I was just really impressed by how much it had to offer in terms of things like food culture as well. I ate some brilliant food while I was up there. The arena is gorgeous. Like it is an incredibly aesthetically pleasing arena. You can see why they decided to use that as the film location. Also, it's got a really great little sort of complex around it in terms of thinking about things like the press center and stuff like that. You've got the SSC Hydro, but also next to it, you've got the SSE Armadillo, which is a brilliantly named building, but also it's essentially a conference center. So, in terms of providing that press space, literally right next door to the arena, it's incredibly well set up and incredibly well designed. I just think Glasgow would be a really, really great host city. I think the infrastructure is brilliant. Again, it was something that I was really, really impressed with. I found it incredibly easy to navigate my way around the city. And I also think it's sort of just in a really nice location. I mean, you can get to a lot of places from Glasgow as well. So if you're a fan who is coming to the city for sort of a week or so and you don't want to stay in Glasgow the entire time, you can go out to Edinburgh, you can go out and see some of the countryside, you can even go down to the Lake District or somewhere like that. And I think it's a really interestingly located spot, and I think it has a lot to offer as a host city. So I absolutely see why it's still in the running, and I hope sincerely that we are not going to be disappointed as fans heading to Glasgow if we do indeed end up heading there next May.
And definitely, I mean, I've been lucky enough to go into the Hydro. I've been there for a concert. I went to see Björk there, and it's sort of done in the oval shape. So like even with the stage itself, like the way that it's sort of arranged on the inside as well is also quite circular. So obviously, it provides us with potential to sort of think outside the box when it comes to sort of typical stage design, which is obviously very like rectangular and square. The also that sort of area does have experience in hosting a Eurovision event. It hosted, I think it was the 2008, I think it was 2008 Eurovision Dance Contest,
Yeah,
which
that rings a bell, so I'm going to say that's right.
yeah, but it is also very like again really close by to sort of lots of other things. There's also like how you said with the transport system, there's the subway network, which it's a tiny little ring that just goes around the sort of the city, and you don't even need to like change or anything because it just goes in one direction and then the other one just goes in the other direction and it's the same thing. It's so good. Um, Liverpool, on the other hand, is very like, of course, it is still very much a sort of transport linked city. I mean, you can get like a train from Manchester to Liverpool in about 50 minutes or so, or if you drive, it's only about an hour or so, which is still incredibly close by. Um, I will say though, in terms of sort of transport there and sort of accessibility, it is quite a hilly city because obviously it is on the banks of the River Mersey. So obviously there will be some level of sort of meeting sea level there. So potentially for people who aren't a big fan of sort of walking uphill or sort of are a little bit harder to sort of reach in that sort of area, it might pose a little bit more of a problem. But again, the city is quite easily accessible through there are trams and trains and buses around the sort of city as well, so it isn't entirely bad. Again, there's a lot that goes on there. There's a big community spirit there in Liverpool. I didn't actually mention it in the video, but you know, the cathedral, the Metropolitan Cathedral, the one that looks a little bit like a wigwam style one. Basically, it was funded through the community, and it took like 40 years to do, but it actually, you know, came together, and now it's one of the most recognizable sort of building landmarks in the city. So it's fantastic, and it does have a really large nightlife there as well. So basically, if you don't know the history of Liverpool, a large contingent of the population is made up of Irish immigrants because following the sort of Great Famine in the 1840s, 1850s, a lot of people emigrated from Ireland, and Liverpool was the sort of next biggest city that they could kind of emigrate to. And so that's why there's like loads of Irish bars all in the city centre. And because of that, you know, like it's very lively. So I could easily see something going on there to at least that would sort of make it a little bit more sort of fun and happy. The arena is quite interesting though, because it's split. Like I mentioned it in the video. The building that the arena is actually in, it's the arena doesn't take up the full building. It sort of only takes up about half of it, which logistically could be a bit of an issue, obviously, because in terms of, you know, the maximum capacity that it has is about 11,000 seated, which is sort of on the minimum side of what the EBU really kind of looks for. But on the flip side, it does mean that you have an entire other half of the arena to play with that you could sort of do outside sort of green room areas so that more people can sort of sit in. Or you could have it as a press center, and then it just makes it so much easier for journalists to kind of just go back and forth for rehearsals, can make it a lot more simple. It could also sort of be like a VIP area as well. Like there's a lot that kind of area can sort of focus on. As well as sort of the iconic seafront, there's been sort of very much stipulated plans that will be turned into a massive Euro village as well. So, you know, right along the river, it would be absolutely fantastic if we could just have some chances of sort of seeing what that would really look like. I think, and not to mention as well, I mean, people in Liverpool are incredibly friendly. I mean, and the same as Glasgow as well, you know, yeah. Everyone is just happy just to see you sort of coming and experiencing the city for yourself. So I can totally get behind that. So I'm really unsure. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I mean, sort of maybe just sort of like looking at some of the other cities as well. Are there any other kind of cities that kind of you felt like maybe should have been included in these final two instead?
I'm not sure there's anywhere I think should have been included instead, simply because I think both Glasgow and Liverpool make such strong cases that I wouldn't have wanted to cut them out for anyone. Manchester was a surprise. Birmingham was my other big surprise, actually. I was very surprised not to see them, even if it is because the venue on the roof on their venue is 4 meters too short. That is the reason they're saying that is why they were not on the final two shortlist. But yeah, Birmingham had a very strong case for it, and some of what went for it also might have counted against it, in that they've very recently hosted quite a lot of major events, the Commonwealth Games being the sort of biggest and most recent one. And there was sort of this idea of, they've proved they can host events that are so big, but also they've already had their moment in the spotlight, and there's so many other cities across the UK who are just as capable of hosting events of that scale, and it's nice to give them another go. So I'm not hugely sad that it's not made the list. I think it would have been a perfectly good venue. I think it's got everything we could have wanted, aside from 4 meters on its venue roof. But it did surprise me not to see it make the list, because I think that it would have put forward quite a strong sort of candidacy in terms of a host city. Um, some of the some of the small sort of under the radar ones. I mean, Leeds. I love Leeds. I'm sad it's not Leeds, but I don't think it had quite as strong a case to put forward as some of the others. Sheffield, similarly, and Sheffield Airport is now closing down, so that doesn't help. And Newcastle, similarly, I think it would have been perfectly good, but I don't think it's quite as strong as some of the others right now. Maybe in a few years' time for all three of them, if the UK becomes some sort of powerhouse at all.
Oh,
But
yeah.
we can only pray. But yeah, Liverpool was a surprise. Surprised not to see Manchester and Birmingham on there, but I think all four of those particular cities would do a really good job hosting, and so I can't be too upset that those are the final two.
I mean, to be fair, Junior Eurovision now the UK is returning to that. So maybe if
Also
the UK,
true.
if the UK wins Junior Eurovision, maybe then one of these other cities might get that chance to host for that too. But we will obviously see. Yeah, I have to sort of say, I mean, my main surprise really was Manchester. I mean, I've said it at the top of this video anyway. I was quite shocked that it didn't sort of make it through. It had the best case for it because depending on sort of the criteria that both the EBU and the BBC were trying to go for. So to see it not make it through just kind of shows how high caliber the bids were for Glasgow and Liverpool. So I can't really, I can't be devastated for it. But also at the same time, I would have loved to see Manchester sort of make it a top three, maybe, or something. Yeah, same for Sheffield. I think it was a little bit, again, like how I said, we all love an underdog here, but I feel like the technical requirements for Sheffield might have sort of gone against it. But yeah, so obviously it would have been nice as well. Leeds also did have a good case going for it as well, to be fair. I did think that, they presented themselves well. They had a really strong arena that would have worked quite well within the requirements, maybe it kind of would go against what the idea of the staging would be like, because as Helen says in the video for the tour of Leeds, the arena is sort of shaped like a fan instead of like kind of a bowl. So it would be kind of harder for sort of seating arrangements to sort of get changed around. So I could understand maybe if that was the reasoning why. But also I think Newcastle did have the sort of the space available for the 6 weeks that it needed to, and that was fine. But I think it was also just the case that maybe the bid wasn't properly prepared enough. Tim, who's also obviously here, his sort of punts right before the announcements came in was Birmingham and Newcastle, and I only dread to think now what he's thinking. I don't know.
I would always be really curious to see more about some of what gets put in these bids, because we see little bits of them. There are bits we can guess. So we know about transport, for example. We know about the arenas. We know where they're likely to be hosted. We can take guesses at things like the village and stuff like that, but we don't necessarily know some of these things. But things like that sort of incorporation of Ukrainian culture, things like theming, or how they would expand events throughout the city or something like that. We don't know the details of these things, and I would be really, really curious and honestly nosy just to see what gets put in these sorts of in the bid books, essentially, because obviously there's stuff in these that we never saw, and I'd be really fascinated to see what contributes to different cities having stronger or weaker cases outside of what we can see, because I think there's definitely stuff that goes on that we don't know about. And I think those videos that we've seen on the Eurovision website recently are a great example of that. We never saw those until those two cities got announced, and yet, especially looking at Liverpool's, you can see why it has made the top two, because that puts forward such a strong and such a passionate case for hosting the contest.
So, sort of, yes, we're down to these two cities now. I'm going to ask you to put your neck on the line. Which one do you think it'll be, Glasgow or Liverpool?
Oh God. I think it's going to depend on what the BBC and UAPBC as well and the EBU want to prioritize. So I think if you are prioritizing passion and you are prioritizing sort of musical heritage and that sort of thing, I think Liverpool absolutely has the edge. I think if you're prioritizing the arena, I think if you're prioritizing maybe transport, possibly, I think Glasgow's airport is possibly a lot slightly better to fly to. Um, I think if you're prioritizing, it's hard to say because I don't know Liverpool as a city, so I'm not 100% sure where they quite differ. But I think if you're prioritizing different things, I think Glasgow's probably got the edge. I think, oh God, this is difficult. I'm actually going to say at this point, I honestly think Liverpool might have an edge. I think they've got a really strong case to put forward, both in terms of the city and the passion for hosting the contest, and also from the incorporation of Ukrainian culture. And I think they've made that very clear as well as part of that, whereas I think Glasgow hasn't necessarily focused on it in the same way. Which again is not to say that they haven't done that in their bid book, which is why I want to see these things. But I think on those factors, I think I'd possibly just give the edge to Liverpool right now.
Very interesting. Sounds very interesting. Yeah, I definitely think you're right in sort of the sense of the transport element. I think, in terms of infrastructure in that sense, Glasgow, I think, is quite far ahead. Like Liverpool has John Lennon Airport, which I regularly fly out of. So it is a quite an easy airport to sort of get to and from. There's bus links that go there. There are trains that kind of take you from sort of like not too far away. It's only like about a 10-minute sort of bus drive to the train, which can then take you either into the city centre or to other areas of the UK, of course, like Manchester or Preston or all the other kind of places within the Northwest. But I do think Glasgow does edge out a bit higher in that sense. I definitely think, at least within the terms of the morale, I think Glasgow has coasted by a bit compared to Liverpool. Like how you said, Glasgow like was the favorite. It was sort of automatically deemed to be the favorite, or at least one of the favorites, whereas Liverpool knows that it wants it, it's showing that it wants it. It's trying to show it's got the capabilities that it can host it. So it really does come down to, what the BBC and the EBU thinks, because let's also put our cards on the table here. The BBC is very much a fan of frugality, for lack of a better term. They're always finding ways to sort of do things as cheaply as possible, and makes sense because the public broadcaster, obviously a lot of their money comes in from television licenses that sort of we pay here in the UK. So obviously they want the money to be best spent on, in the best way, as sort of being the most cost effective. And to be perfectly honest, I could make a case for either of them. I think just because of the significance of the film, and I think for the significance of the fact that it's not just based in England the whole time, I think I would sort of say that Glasgow might have a little bit more of an edge. Personally, I would love to see Liverpool host it, not just because, it's a city in the Northwest, and, it's a city with bustling musical heritage, and it's only, it's literally only an hour's train from where I currently am. That my train station's literally just there. I could just get on a direct train and it'll be fine. But I think in terms of logistics, in terms of internationality, and think also the fact that they are wanting to show the world that Glasgow can do it. I could easily see Glasgow sort of just about taking it. Now, again, we won't really know what the sort of ins and outs of the decision will be made, and I don't think we ever really will. But at the same time, it would be nice to sort of know what's going through the BBC and EBU's head in this kind of thing. So who knows? Who knows? I mean, are you excited to find out when it's going to be?
Excited and terrified. I'm I don't know why I'm terrified. It's not going to make it. I mean, I'm going to do my best to get along regardless. And I'm quite happy going to both of these places. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what shape the contest is going to take over the next year. And especially because this really is taking place under somewhat unprecedented circumstances, not least in that it's being hosted by two broadcasters, essentially. Like both the BBC and UAPBC are both essentially host broadcasters, and that itself is going to be fascinating. And it's just, there is a lot to be interested in for the next year. And it's kind of a shame that it is something we have to deal with at all, because obviously under any sort of better circumstances, Ukraine would be hosting the contest. And so there is always that slight tinge of sadness and sort of disappointment to kind of all of this, really. But at the same, so saying that it's exciting, there is always that little niggle to it. There's always that little bit where it's just like, yeah, but it is going to be really interesting, and I think either of the venues we're going to get are going to put on a great show, hopefully. So it's just going to be interesting to see what shape that show is going to take, what it's going to look like, and hopefully how we as fans are going to experience it.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think, again, it goes without saying that, of course, everyone at the Eurovision site team is just sending all of their sympathies out to the people of Ukraine and everyone that's been affected by the war. Obviously, this is not the situation that we wanted to be in. But of course, we're doing the best that we can, and this seemed to be the best compromise, as much as we know that UAPPC would have wanted to hosted it on their own. But of course, such things we can't exactly be responsible for, basically. But I think, I think also, I think it's going to be interesting because this is the first time that there's two host broadcasters that are sort of collaborating for a Eurovision show. And like, we've never seen that before. And of course, they're going to be coming at it from two different angles. Of course, UAPBC will probably have a lot of say in terms of the creative direction of the show, whereas sort of the BBC will be taking on more of the production aspects of things. But of course, there will be a sort of level of, incorporating a little bit of a British element in there, and seeing how that will interact with the Ukrainian style will be very interesting to see. How other countries will kind of be playing into this as well will also be kind of interesting to watch as well. But either Glasgow or Liverpool, both cities are fantastic. Both of them are, next to the sea/river. So again, not entirely like out in Turin where you're basically just, in the middle of vast lands, basically.
There's a river going right through the middle of Turin.
When I think of Turin, I just think of just like not barren wasteland, but just like a little valley, basically, and it's just hot. I don't know. That's just how I remember it, even though I never really went. Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting, and as sad as it is that we're having to host Ukraine's Eurovision, I mean, we should also be excited. Like, this is a Eurovision. This is not sort of a time, like, this is a moment for everyone to sort of come together in joy and happiness through the medium of music, even if it is just through unprecedented circumstances. So fingers crossed, good luck to both Glasgow and Liverpool. We will be expecting a decision from the BBC by next month, apparently, according to sources. Or at least within the press release, they say within weeks, which basically means by the end of next month. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of October we will have our host city. And then all of the hotels will be completely sold out, which means that I will have
As if
no
they're
idea.
not already.
Fingers
I'm going to
crossed.
steal something quickly off Elaine and sort of steal her joke and elaborate on it. But if we get it, I mean, it is going to be in either of these two cities, but maybe they can rebrand themselves as Liverpool and Glasgow for the week of Eurovision.
Oh my God. That is phenomenal. Oh my God, I love that. Okay, yeah, actually, no, that would be the best way possible. You know, it makes sense. It incorporates the Ukrainian elements. You know, you can't say that. I mean, it's literally a temporary.
Liverpool's twinned with, I think Glasgow might even
Liverpool
be twinned with Odessa.
Liverpool is twinned with Odessa. I know that.
Liverpool and Odessa. Oh,
Yeah.
God damn it. You really messed up your twinning for the name puns.
Well, maybe Glasgow. I don't know if Glasgow is. Imagine if Glasgow is twinned with Liverpool.
You know where Glasgow is actually twinned with that we've just discovered today? Turin.
Where? Really?
Really?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, that would make sense to carry the Eurovision sort of elements on. Who knows? Who knows? But yes, so yes, good luck to either Glasgow or Liverpool. We will be waiting with bated breath for the final results. I am not going to be able to sleep. And basically, all I know is that I'm pinning my hopes at least on Liverpool, so it means I can just go home to my bed every night. That'd be fantastic. In the meantime, in the meantime, please do continue to tell us, let us know what you think. Obviously, who's your favorite? Who do you think should host Eurovision? Who do you think will host Eurovision, if you think? Who's your sort of preference? Also, I mean, is there any city that you wish was hosting instead of either Glasgow or Liverpool? That would also be fantastic to let us know that too. And yeah, in the meantime, please continue to follow us on all of our social media. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at That Euro Site. We're also doing our podcast as well, so be sure to check out that on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. So, and also hit the bell, subscribe, do all the things you need to do, just so, you always get notified for whenever the next video that we cover is. And I don't know what I'm going to, I feel like I'm going to have to I'm going to have to eat some haggis and some fish and chips. I don't know what's a typical Liverpool food. I don't even know.
I'm not sure. I've been trying to think of one and I can't think of one.
No, I mean, anyone who's watching this from Liverpool, comment down below what sort of food we should try or something that's from Liverpool, so we can
some haggis on a deep fried Mars bar for Glasgow.
Oh yeah, with a side of iron brew.
Yes. So, now that I've discovered that iron brew actually tastes pretty nice.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Again, also just be sure to check out our tours of Liverpool and Glasgow as well, so you always know sort of what the cities are like. We've spent a lot of time and money on this, so we want to make sure that we're helping to inform fans coming to the cities anyway. So yeah, so shall we say goodbye?
Bye.
Bye.